Welcome to another episode of the Classic Chloe Show. We talk about music and its effects on every aspect of our daily lives. I'm your host, Chloe Castillo, and I have another fantastic guest for you today. Internationally active performer, arts and entrepreneur, and member of the European Cultural Parliament, as well as founder and director of the New York Vocal Arts Academy, Emilio Pons. Welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. Happy to be
Of
here.
course. Absolutely. So I'm super excited about this discussion because I think we have a lot to discuss. You are someone who's another one of the very few people out there I think really understands the importance of music in our culture and how that impacts our nation on the whole. So I'm very excited to get your takes on all this. Just to start off here, let's kind of dive into the Trump administration's recent proposal to cut the National Endowment for the Arts, funding. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that decision?
So I have mixed feelings about it. Somebody who is a dual citizen of Germany and Mexico, but a legal resident of the U.S., and having lived primarily my adult life in Europe, I am very, very much aware of the importance of funding the arts at a government level from a governmental perspective, and the ability that to create art that really, really depends on federal funding, which is very, very handsome in Europe. On the other hand, I am very much aware of the fact that over the past administrations, the Obama administrations and Biden administrations, there was a conscious effort to weaponize the arts and turn them into instruments of political propaganda in favor of the left's agenda. So I'm not too keen on continuing to fund that. However, I think that in general, people are making the mistake of assuming that Trump is killing the arts in the U.S. by cutting funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, when in fact, what the government currently uh, um, allocates to the arts in this country is pretty much insignificant in the large scheme of things. So I would wish that more people would just have an informed opinion about, based on facts and statistics, about this issue rather than a knee-jerk reaction to it. If we look at the funding that is currently being allocated in the US and compare it to the funding in Europe, for example, we'll see that um, what's currently allocated to the arts here is negligible. Um, if we look at the total funding, including uh, all the federal agencies, the state arts agencies, and the local arts agencies, um, according to the last data available, which is from 2023, the total funding for the arts was only 2.28 billion, and that comes up to a per capita investment per year of only $6.83.
So the federal funding that is going out isn't going very far. Clearly, I mean, you can't
Correct.
even get an Uber to go to your rehearsal, much less have an instrument and actually be able to create music at that kind of level. So, I guess
So if you compare it, for example, per capita, right? Sorry to interrupt you, but if you
no, go
compare
ahead.
it to per capita to the three main um, competitors, so to speak, culturally for cultural hegemony in Europe, which are France, Germany, and Russia, they invest significantly more. So in order to compare apples with apples and not apples with oranges, we have to make the calculation per capita, obviously, right? So France, for example, has a population of roughly 68.2 million people. It's only about the size of Texas, and their budget for culture is 9 billion, right? Remember that the aggregate culture budget in the states is 2.28 billion, right? So France has
Wow.
9 billion for culture, which amounts to $131.97 per capita. This is 1,832% more than the US. Germany has a population of 84.5 48 million. It's roughly the size of Montana. Our budget, because I'm German, our budget for culture is 2.3 billion. Per capita, that amounts to 26.98, right? $26.98. That's 295% more than the US. Russia has a population of 143 million. It's about 1.8 times larger than the US. Its budget is 2.3 billion, but that amounts nevertheless to per capita $16.69. So still Russia 144% more than the US. Now, if we look at the really leading investors in culture in Europe, the figures just skyrocket by comparison. And this Hungary, for example, is a perfect example of what the US should be doing. Hungary is has a right-wing conservative government already for many years. Hungary is basically the strongest last bastion of conservative culture in Europe and conservative politics, along with Poland to some extent, even though not the very, very last government. And they've been pushing hard against all this DEI nonsense. Famously, for example, the Hungarian State Opera um, a few years ago staged Porgy and Bess. And you know that according to the Gershwin state, Porgy and Bess can only be performed by black performers. Well, the Hungarians cleverly beat the woke at their own game and said, well, even though we're using a bunch of white performers, they all identify as black for the purposes of these performances. And they managed to do it that way, to get around that limitation. So that shows to you that actually culture has the ability to also send strong messages about what really means what it really means to do culture, to protect European values, and to fight against the woke nonsense of diversity, inclusion, equity, and whatnot.
So I want to ask you because you're very well versed in this, clearly, as we can all see. I mean, you're so well spoken on this topic, and so I want to ask you. I've noticed personally, I think anyone who has eyes can see at this point that Americans don't value art, European art the way they used to. We have things like the Piss Christ, and we have things like, with architecture, for example, has gone downhill, and, in enormous bounds in the wrong direction. And so I
Right.
just want you to, going back to music here, what is lacking? Is it education? Is it just the culture itself that we've embraced as Americans has gone so far left and has become so immoral that true beauty we're not used to it anymore? What's missing in the American landscape?
It's a combination of things, and all of the ones that you mentioned should be included. So, Americans have given a lot to the world in terms of music. Basically, every pop genre that now dominates world popular culture stems from the US, whether we're talking about jazz or rock, like classic rock and roll, pop music. Unfortunately, also I hate rap and hip hop. I can't stand them, but whatever. Basically, all these genres, electronic music, everything started here in the U.S. Fine, but for a while, Americans had a strong enough educational system and a strong enough traditional culture that they were able to also appreciate classical uh, art. And I'm not talking just about music. That's why I didn't say classical music, but also including classical music. So you see, back in the day, singers like Frank Sinatra, for example, would include every now and then classical music. And there's a wonderful video of him singing La ci darem la mano, a duet from Mozart's Don Giovanni, in his own crooning way, but nevertheless incorporating classical music into the equation. You see that back. I'm 48 years old, so when I grew up, and I grew up partly here in the States, visiting my family very often in the summers, all my American family, I'm very close to, and you'd see classical cartoons, whether it was Looney Tunes or the Smurfs or whatever, they all featured classical music, right? And we see um, towards the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s a ghettoization process of even popular culture, where gradually classical music disappears and the very, very vulgar and extremely uncouth music from literally the ghetto, rap and hip hop, start dominating everything. And it leads to the point where a couple of years ago, this infamous song by Cardi B, Wet, ASS and PUSSY, becomes Song of the Year. If you had asked me 20 years ago, while I was doing my master's and my doctorate at Indiana University in Bloomington, that the day would come where such a title would be the title of the most famous song of the year in the United States, I would not have believed it. And, it's high time that we call a spade and say this is not okay. And again, it's not that long ago that Americans had a completely different approach to culture. When Van Cliburn, the American pianist, came back from having won the Tchaikovsky piano competition in Russia, he was basically hailed as a hero. Now, when you ask your average American to name three famous classical pianists, they're unable to do it. They're even the young singers who study with me and want to become opera singers. Their knowledge of the past is extremely limited. And to make matters worse, all these universities and conservatories and music schools are pushing this ridiculous notion that classical music is racist.
Absolutely. And that is so true that, to me, when you undermine classical music as an art in our society, then it slowly, or I say slowly, probably a lot faster than we think, tears down the rest of our societal structure when it comes to culture. And I think that, and like you just said, you're one of the very few who's actually doing something about this. So I want to change courses really quick here before we end. We only have about 5 minutes left on the clock. So I want to wrap up here, but I want to ask you, you have something called the Brownstone in New York. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So I used to have an academy and a festival in Germany that was the first in its kind. The aim of the academy was to bring together, without the filter of an agent, emerging young singers on the one hand and leading artistic and casting directors from important institutions, from anything from the Vienna State Opera to the Festival d'Aix-en-Provence to the opera in Stuttgart, Zurich, Teatro Real de Madrid, you name it. And I did that successfully for about 8 years, up until the point where the pandemic hit. And then I realized, okay, things are going really, really awry in Germany. I don't want to stay here any longer. I We can talk at some other point about what's going on there. The Islamization of the country, I find absolutely disgusting and scandalous and very dangerous in Germany. Plus all the reckless spending to cover these and other expenses, just much like what Biden was doing here with the illegal migrants. And I decided, okay, I'm going to leave Europe behind. I moved to New York, and I started the same idea, obviously in a smaller format, because New York is the most expensive city in the world. I couldn't have a villa like the one that I had in Germany, which was like nearly 10,000 square feet. I couldn't do this here. I'm not a tycoon. But I found a brownstone in Hamilton Heights in New York, where I set up shop again, and I continued to do exactly that. I created a 501c3 called the New York Vocal Arts Academy that I invite everybody to check out and to support, because the mission of this institution is to continue with what I was doing before, bring casting directors and artistic directors from important theaters to be directly in contact with emerging opera singers, but also train them in this genre, which is a European genre, and to do so in a way that is completely deprived of any sort of ideology. In fact, it's not like I'm brainwashing them to vote for Trump. Of course, I'm happy if they are conservative, but I teach all gamuts in the sorry all political affiliations within the gamut of possibilities. If they do happen to have any one of these features, but they are fantastic, fine, then by all means. That's what true non-discrimination, by the way, is all about.
Absolutely. That was a that I love that description. That was fantastic, Emilio. Um, but um, you mentioned a lot of Americans want this. I would say a lot of Americans want this almost without knowing. I think a lot of Americans don't realize exactly, the level of, depravity this been going on in the music industry and the whole, classical music and pop music and whatever you want to categorize it as, whether it be rap, that's a whole another argument for another day, but rap, pop, hip hop, classical, jazz, just the whole music industry on the whole has really shifted towards leftism, as we all know. But I think that many conservatives, many Americans, don't really see this shift as it's been done, very strategically over a longer period of time, and so they become desensitized to this and told, oh, like you said earlier, if you call this out for what it is, you're racist or you're homophobic or whatever it may be. And so I think that seeing President Trump saying, pretty recently that it's going to be the golden age of art and culture in America throughout these next 4 years. And I think that a key to making that a reality is beyond just, the government's funding going to certain institutions or certain, to certain ideas, I guess, but for the American people to actually grasp the concept of this truth, basically, that it really is incredibly important for our nation if you want to see a resurgence in art and culture, if we want to see, a cultural renaissance happen across America, we have to become aware of this as an issue in the first place. So, and
But
along with that, we also have to have people who are doing something to really shift it, like you are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
this is the reason why, as I said, I have mixed feelings about the budget cuts,
Sure.
because creating great art requires a lot of money. And so you need to have funding to create the proper art that will really inspire and uplift people, right? Because I do believe that the Republicans' fatal flaw is to firmly believe that art is something that the free market will take care of. And the reality is that the free market is only interested in maximizing profit. And
Sure.
it is way more profitable to appeal to the lowest common denominator and to the lowest brow amongst the population, and really the lowest standards in art and culture. And for that reason, we cannot just leave this up to the free market. And the other thing where I would really, really hope that the Trump administration would uh, uh, carry out additional changes is that it's not sufficient to change the members of the board of administrators of an institution if the people who actually run the show are still ideologically captured by the left. So, for example, Trump was very wise to change the board of Kennedy Center, right? And also, contrary to popular opinion, he did not self-appoint himself as chairman of the board. The new board appointed him. Let's also get that straight. But you can have a very conservative board with the right values, but at the end of the day, if the people who are actually running the show and calling the shots on a daily basis, whether it's the head of Washington National Opera and their artistic administrator or anything else that happens at Kennedy Center, you have a problem, right? And for example, right now, the head of Kennedy Center used to work at Opera America before, not of Kennedy Center, of the Washington National Opera. Um, he used to work at Opera America, and Opera America is infamous for, amongst other things, starting all their meetings with land acknowledgments. Like, oh, we are here occupying land of the whatever tribe. Like, well, either give it back and get the hell out, or just shut up and stop with the virtue signaling. But as a result of having also a leftist head of Washington National Opera, you've seen flop after flop at Kennedy Center, at Washington National Opera in particular, when it comes to opera, because they've programmed uh, very mediocre works by female composers, like Grounded, the opera that also then flopped here at the Met. They've done things like cast Denise Graves, who is way past her prime, in a transgender role, basically, even though it's a completely arbitrary thing to do in Fidelio, et cetera, et cetera. So uh, again, I'm urging the Trump administration to take a hard look at the people who are actually running these institutions, and also replace them with people who are either, you know, um, true believers in the MAGA cause. That's also another important thing to do, because there are a lot of people who are now trying to hijack the cause and pretend that they were with us all along. This is really not the case. And to really clean house and redirect the efforts of the administration. If if the economy is great, if our border is secure, if if the elections are finally also secure, etc., if all these things that the Trump administration wants to accomplish are indeed accomplished, and we are on a very good way to do that, but the message that the left continues to push through art and entertainment continues to be dominated by them, and continues to be one of cultural Marxism and divisiveness and race hustling and all that, we will continue as a political force to struggle every 4 years to recapture the minds of the people who are being brainwashed by the left through art and culture. This is a very, very important realm of human endeavor that cannot be overlooked, and that certainly should not be defunded. It just has to be funded properly. And one way to go about doing that, and I will probably stop with this since I know we're running out of time, is to maybe find a creative way to couple the funding with the federal funding or the government funding with the success at the box office of individual privately funded operations. So you have an opera that is actually very well done, for example, with proper casting that is not based on ethnicity, or not based on sexual orientation or identities, or gender identity, and it succeeds at the box office. Well, that particular production should be then eligible for funding, so that it can be replicated somewhere else, or that similar productions can be done in the future as an incentive for their appeal to the larger population, and not for pushing some fringe agenda, right? That's one way to go about it. And we have to find new creative ways to propel the arts, and to incentivize uh, good behavior also amongst administrators. And as I said, also replace all the ones who are ideologically captured by the left. If we do this correctly, we could end up having a Republican government for decades to come.
Absolutely. And I think you just really summarized that nicely. Recapturing the arts and recapturing music in particular, all of the arts that are very important, is a way to, you know, fix our country on the right track, and for decades to come, potentially. Like you just said, it's not a matter of, an overnight election results. It's a matter of, and this is a generational matter. This is going to have an impact for generations to come. We've seen how the left's impact has had the exact same strategy with the way they've handled arts and culture and politics. So I think that taking, almost the left's lead in a way, seeing, capturing the importance of this, and actually, really utilizing that, will be enormously helpful for the future of our nation. So, Emilio, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful insights. Really appreciate it. So, where can my audience find you?
So they can find me either on my personal Instagram, which is Emilio Pons, uh, on YouTube, obviously, or emiliopons.com, or my personal website. at the website of my foundation, nyvocalarts.org, or on my podcast, and maybe eventually I'll have you also as a guest of my podcast, where my podcast is called American Reconquista, and it's a podcast about current affairs, politics, but also about culture, obviously from a conservative traditionalist perspective, but importantly from an international perspective, because again, I'm not American, and from a multilingual perspective, because with me being fluent in 6 languages, I can invite uh, guests who are not comfortable being interviewed in English.
Looking to give your wardrobe an upgrade? Well, look no further. Here at God Country & Kin, we've got you covered from head to toe, from shoulder to shoulder, and everything in between. Introducing our brand new Patriotic Collection, designed to display your patriotic spirit with a stylish look that's sure to turn heads. And the best part is, you don't have to break the bank to be your best you. Why wait? Visit us online or in-store today and elevate your style with God Country & Kin. God Country & Kin, where patriotism meets style. Shop now. Visit the Patriot TV store and look for the God Country Kin banner to find the perfect outfit, shirt, accessory, or maybe a great hat. You can totally see yourself rocking this hat. I know you can. And check out all the great stuff we've got to show your patriotism at patriot.tv.store. Click that link above that says store and join me there at the Patriot TV store.
Attention American business owners, big or small, your company deserves to be seen, and Patriot TV is here to help. We're proud to support American-owned businesses by offering a free listing of your company on Patriot TV Store. That's right, no cost, just visibility to millions of loyal viewers who want to support American businesses like yours. Whether you run a small business or a nationwide company, this is your chance to reach a dedicated audience on Patriot TV Store on major smart TVs like Samsung, LG, Sony, TCL, Roku, also on Apple, Android, Amazon, Fire Stick, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Truth Social, X, and of course, the Patriot TV Store app and website. It's our way of giving back to the community and helping American businesses thrive. Let's work together to build a stronger America. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Get your free business listing today. Contact us at info@patriot.tv.
Think you need a new roof? Think again. Roofs aren't made like they used to be. They have significantly less asphalt in them than they did 20 years ago. That's causing roofs to wear out way before they should. Roof Max can extend the life of your roof for at least 5 and up to 15 years, guaranteed. 9 out of 10 roofs qualify. Restore your roof at a fraction of the cost for a new roof. Mention Patriot TV and get their $859 roof tune-up for free. Call 1-800-ROOF-MAX. Wonderful, Emilio. Thank you so much for joining us here. I apologize. I'm having a Mike Pence moment over here with a little tiny fly, so if I'm all distracted, that's what's going on. But thank you so much for joining us again. Great to have you, and hope to talk to you more about this soon. Thank you so much, Emilio.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please subscribe to the Classically Chloe Show on Rumble, YouTube, and Spotify. Please also follow me at classically_Chloe on Instagram and Classically Chloe on all their platforms. See you next week. God bless.